All right, so our last section in these notes deal with the rate of change. Now, when we talk about the rate of change, we are going to take what we know about ratios and we're just kind of tweak it a little bit. So when we talked about ratios in chapter 3, we defined ratios as comparing two quantities, okay? Well, when you compare two quantities, that's fine, but the rate of change is when you compare two quantities as they are changing. So for your fill in the blank on your notes, you need to write the rate of change is when you compare two quantities as they are changing. Okay? So that's your blank under that section. To give you some examples of rates of change, the most common example would be comparing costs over time. So if we want to compare gas prices from the beginning of the month to gas prices at the end of the month, I could give you a table that shows you the gas, for the first 30 days or whatever, and as you track that change in the price, you can actually determine the rate of change, how many, the price as it changes per day or per week. When we talk about temperature, if you want to look at how the rate of how temperature changes during a winter month, I can give you each day, and depending on the number of days, we can track the difference in the temperature from the 3rd of March to the 3rd of April. So when we're talking about rate of change, it actually is not really a formula, it's just describing a relationship. So where it says rate of change on your notes, rate of change equals, here's what I want you to write. It's the change in your y values, and I'm going to put a word in here, it's going to take you all the way back to chapter 1, your dependent variables divided by the change in your x values, which are your independent variables. So why am I bringing up these words from September, from chapter 1, is because you're going to be given, tables of information. They may have X and Y, they may be XY tables, or they may be tables that are looking at cost over time. You need to know where to put, how to set up your ratio, how to set up your rate of change. So your dependent variables, that's going to be your time, that's going to be the number of days, certain things like that will always be the numerator. Your independent variables will be the costs, things that are actually changing will be the dependent variables, and then your things like time and the number of days will be the independent variables. But this is probably how you'll relate to it the most. Your y values, you're going to take, just like your y2 minus y1, take two y values, subtract, and then you're going to take two x values, subtract. When you divide them, you've got your rate of change. The key word that you're going to see for rate of change when you're describing it is just a 3-letter word, per. So if we're looking at temperature over time, the change in temperature per day. If we're talking about gas prices, this is the number of the gasoline price per day, the number of gallons per mile from the beginning of the trip to your end of the trip, certain things like that. You'll see the word per in your rate of change. So on your notes, you've got two examples, two tables. The first table shows you the cost to paint a house for a given number of hours. Well, here's the deal. They're telling you that for 4 hours, 6 hours, or 8 hours, this is how much that you would have to pay. Well, our rate of change will tell you the amount that you have to pay per hour for 1 hour. So if you want to, paint a house that's going to take 12 hours, you would use that rate of change to know how much, per hour, so I know how many hours I can charge, how much money I can charge for 12 hours. So when you look at your table, the first thing I want you to do is, can you label which quantity is time and which quantity is X and which quantity is Y. Well, you got time and hours, and I'm not going to do the whole thing. You got it on your paper. So you got time and you got hours. Well, if we use that rule of thumb that I told you guys about last week, usually when you have a table, the X value is usually going to be given first. Okay? The X value is usually going to be given first. So here is your short little table here. So it's saying that if you paint for 4 hours, if it takes 4 hours to paint your house, if it takes 4 hours to paint your house, this is cost, it's going to cost $90. If it's going to take 6 hours to paint your house, $135. And if it's going to cost 8 hours, a full day's work, $180. So we've got to take this table and figure out what is the cost per hour. Well, we're going to take any two X values. So I'll take the first one, last one. I'm going to take these two X values and subtract it. And I'm going to take these two Y values and subtract it. But this is the order that you have to keep. Remember I said at the beginning of the video, when you're talking about slope, order matters. Well, the same thing for your rate of change. You got to have your Y values as the numerator. So my rate of change, or my ROC, for this problem, I'm going to subtract my two Y values, subtract my two X values, and then I'm going to divide. So 180 minus 90 is 90. 8 minus 4 is just 4. Use your calculator. When you take your calculator and figure out what 90 divided by 4 is, and I don't have a calculator up here.
So do it by hand.
Come on!
90 divided by 4.
Okay. $22.50 per hour. That's the amount you have to pay per hour to get your house painted. So if you're not interested in spending in a 4-hour, 6-hour, or 8-hour job, you just figure out, well, if I need 12 hours, if I need 2 hours, I multiply those number of hours by $22.50. This is your rate of change. They're charging you $20.50 per hour. Okay? Now, for example 7, same thing. Your X values is your time of days. Your Y values is your cost. And I don't know where I'm going to go for this one. So you know what? I'm just going to talk it. To find the rate of change based on the number of days that you can rent a DVD, you're going to subtract, pick 2 points on your table. Look, we'll do the first and the last again. You're going to subtract the cost, subtract the time, and then divide. So I'll just come over here in this little corner. For example 7, my rate of change, I'm going to take the change in my Y values from the first point to the last point, so that's going to be $10.50 minus $6. And I'm going to take the difference in the 2 days, 6 days minus 4 days, and then I'm going to subtract. So I got to do this by hand too.
Yep.
Okay, 10.50, so that's $10. I know that's 50 cents. $3.50, right?
No.
No, okay.
Try $4.50.
There it is, $4.50, okay. Divided by 2, I got that one.
The math is easy.
Yes, just takes a minute, okay. So $4.50 divided by 2 is $2.25. So our rate of change is telling us that you would pay $2.25 per day to rent the DVD. So what we're going to realize is your rate of change is just a fancy smancy way of describing the slope. The slope we use when we're talking about a coordinate plane or a graph. When we're talking in terms of real application or in a table, the slope turns into rate of change. They're one and the same. Okay? So change in y values, that's the same as your y2 minus y1. Change in x values, that's the same as your x2 minus x1. So just keep that in mind. We didn't do anything different here for the rate of change. We just applied it to some names and a table and a couple of numbers.
Real world problems.
Real world, that's all. Rate of change is just the slope in the real world. That's it.